Hello, super students of Khan Academy. My name is Kevin, and I'm excited to talk to you about why you breathe. Seems kind of boring because you already know that you need to breathe to stay alive, but there's more to it than that. We're going to take it all the way down to the cellular level and talk about aerobic cellular respiration. But before that, I want to talk about what really gives you the urge to breathe. And for that, we're going to do a little bit of an experiment, okay? Get ready to hold your breath. I'm going to time you. Just see how long you can go. Ready? Marks, get set. Okay, I'm going to still be breathing myself while you're holding your breath. So I'm going to be moving air in and out of my lungs. So down through my trachea, through the bronchioles, just moving that air in and out. But if that's all I was doing, that wouldn't be enough to keep me alive. The air needs to go beyond the lungs. At the microscopic level of the lungs are tiny little air sacs, spongy little air sacs called alveoli, and here we see deoxygenated blood coming in and releasing CO2 and picking up oxygen. So the alveoli are covered in capillaries from the pulmonary arteries, and your blood is getting oxygenated. That's great. It can then get taken back to the heart, fully oxygenated and circulated all over the body. And everywhere that the blood goes, to the muscles, to the brain, to the digestive system, all those places need to pick up oxygen and get rid of CO2. So you'll have capillaries throughout your tissues, and at the capillaries, that's where the gas exchange takes place between the blood and the tissues. So every cell has a need for the gas exchange to take place, right? You're needing to create a lovely liquid environment around your cells. Now, all these cells, you can see, are producing carbon dioxide. If you've held your breath this long, I'm impressed, because as you produce carbon dioxide, it's combining with the water, becoming carbonic acid, and making hydrogen ions. Now, your red blood cells really speed up this process. They have an enzyme called carbonic anhydrase that greatly speeds up the combination of carbon dioxide and water to form that carbonic acid, which in turn breaks down to a bicarbonate ion and the hydrogen ion. It's that hydrogen ion that is making your blood more and more acidic. You have chemoreceptors in your medulla oblongata at the base of your brain, pons and medulla, that's your respiratory center. And by now, if you've held your breath for 2 minutes, I'm really impressed. You should be impressed. Okay, I'm going to stop the timer because, my goodness, that was a long time to hold your breath. Oops. Here we are. And now you're breathing in and out, I presume. I hope you're still breathing. And in the lungs, the whole equation is reversed. As you get rid of your CO2, the hydrogen ions combine with the bicarbonate ions, they form carbonic acid again, and they go back to water and carbon dioxide. So you want to keep on breathing. That's good. That explains the urge to breathe, but it doesn't really tell you what you're doing with the oxygen or how you're making that carbon dioxide. So let's look a little closer. Let's first look at the red blood cells. Every red blood cell is just packed with hemoglobin molecules. Here's a hemoglobin molecule. It has 4 sites where it can carry oxygen. So one hemoglobin molecule carries 4 oxygen molecules. You can carry about 1 billion oxygen molecules in a single red blood cell. And you have trillions of red blood cells. You have more red blood cells than any other cell type in your body. About 70% of your body cells are red blood cells. Okay, so we're delivering the oxygen. We're also delivering glucose. We maintain a constant blood glucose level. And the oxygen, the glucose are entering the cell. And what we see coming out, we see carbon dioxide coming out and water. Didn't think of your cells making water, but they do. Don't really keep track of that. It's not an urgent need to get rid of that water. So here's one more equation. C6H12O6, that's glucose. It's a 6-carbon molecule that we'd love to talk about how that's made by plants, but that and oxygen are going into the cell, and coming out of this equation, water and carbon dioxide. Okay? And that's a mitochondrion, which is the powerhouse of your cell. Very important. So most of these reactions that we're talking about take place within the mitochondria. The cell can take apart the glucose molecule do the very first step without mitochondria. But the second and third step, the citric acid cycle and electron transport chain, they're both going to be inside the mitochondrion, and you're going to produce your CO2 and your water molecules, and you're going to produce lots of ATP. Now, you notice that's not part of the equation because you're not building ATP out of sugar. You're just using the energy that's in here and trapping some of that energy into the high energy bonds of ATP. ATP is essential for every cell. All the reactions that cells do are carried out with these little energy tokens of ATP. So whether it's making proteins or sending nerve signals or moving muscles or dividing cells, cells are extremely busy places. They have extremely high demands for ATP. So could a cell live without mitochondria? It seems like the answer should be no. However, back to your red blood cells, they need ATP, but they do not have mitochondria. Look, most of their cellular organelles were ripped out before they were mature. They have no nucleus, no mitochondria, no Golgi apparatus, no endoplasmic reticulum. They're just packed full of hemoglobin. They are oxygen-carrying molecules, and they don't do a lot of other things. Now, the irony is that without mitochondria, red blood cells cannot use oxygen. So here they are, poor cell carrying 1 billion molecules of oxygen, can't use a single one of them. So how does it get any ATP at all? Through just the first step. So it gets about 2 ATP per glucose molecule. I'll show that again. But here's an overview visually of aerobic cellular respiration, where the oxygen and the glucose are coming in, the carbon dioxide, the water coming out the other side of the equation, and lots of ATP production. That's why your cells are carrying out aerobic cellular respiration. I'm going to show another slide where we go look at it a little differently, and that's with glycolysis, citric acid cycle, and electron transport chain. So glycolysis is the one step where you don't need the mitochondria, so this is what the red blood cells can do. They can do the glycolysis. Glyco refers to sugar, lysis is to take apart. So there are several steps within this box called glycolysis, but the end result is that this 6-carbon molecule comes out as 2 3-carbon molecules. You've essentially broken it in half. Now, the next step, the citric acid cycle, requires a 2-carbon molecule coming into it. So this 3-carbon molecule that you had, you're going to take off one of the carbons and you're going to lose a carbon dioxide. And you're going to do that with the other 3-carbon molecule. So the transition between glycolysis and citric acid cycle, you lose a couple molecules of carbon as carbon dioxide. Now, just one more time, glycolysis does yield a couple of ATP, and that's what the red blood cells are surviving off of, into the citric acid cycle. Many steps, many enzymes. This goes around and around. The bottom line, the glucose is taken apart completely, right? That 2-carbon molecule, blip, 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 blip. Now all just carbon dioxide is released. It's going to go back into the bloodstream. A couple more ATP. But the other thing that's happening is that as we've taken apart this molecule, the molecule's all taken apart now. It's done. But we still have the electron transport chain. Well, how does that go? It's because we've been sending hydrogen ions and electrons over to the electron transport chain. We're not going to go into the details of how it gets transported there or what the enzymes do here, but the hydrogen ions are put on one side of a membrane. They make this concentration gradient, and as they're let back through the membrane, they turn a motor. It's called ATP Synthase. It's a beautiful thing. As it turns, it just cranks out the ATP. So this is the big payout for ATP, is to do the electron transport chain. And the electron transport chain only works if there's oxygen present to combine with these hydrogen ions at the end, and the electrons. It's the final electron acceptor. So one oxygen will take a couple hydrogen ions, a couple of electrons, and form water. So this is where the water's coming from. The last step of the electron transport chain is where you're using oxygen and forming the water. These first 2 steps, glycolysis and citric acid cycle, are where you're producing the carbon dioxide. So, summary, a few take-home messages. Your urge to breathe is due to CO2 levels building up and your blood becoming more acidic. All cells need ATP to survive. Without oxygen, you can only get 2 ATP per glucose molecule. That's enough for red blood cells, yeast, several bacteria. But with oxygen present, you can get about 30 ATP per glucose molecule. And so many more ATP, and the glucose molecule gets completely taken apart to carbon dioxide and water. So it's interesting that the food that you digested, you're actually breathing it out as a gas, as carbon dioxide. And the air that you breathe in, the oxygen that you breathe in, is actually staying inside of you as water. Hope you enjoyed that and learned some fun things. Thanks.